It's time for Growing Hope, the show determined to grow up hearts open to pursue the extraordinary. Because you are extraordinary! And now, it's your host, Kathryn Lang.
Hello there, and welcome to Growing Hope, where we are setting a foundation for growing hope in our lives so we can be hope in the world. I am Kathryn Lang, your Hope Smith extraordinaire, guiding us on this journey. We're talking about how we need to have hope. So that we can have hope, we need to build that habit of hope so that we have hope in the hopeless moments. Because there are going to be times when it just seems like it's just not. It's just not. You know, you can't even verbalize what it is because the struggle is so profound in the moment. And the more you have that habit of hope, the more you'll be able to keep going in those hopeless moments. The first point was to make God first. And I have seen it in my own life. If I forget to put the word first, then I struggle through the rest of the day. But since I have been consistently putting the word first, usually the only time that the first thing I do is not read scripture is those days when I'm sick and I don't even get up until afternoon, or I don't get up that day at all. Most of the time now, it's become such a habit. It's like getting up and making the bed, or getting up and before brushing your teeth before you leave. It's a habit. It is as natural as breathing because I've been doing it consistently. Started with Proverbs, added the Psalms, and then developed the 90 Days Through the Bible study guide to help me get through the Bible on a consistent basis. So find your way and make God first. The second point was to smile. We all like to encounter smiles, right? Smiles make the day a little bit better. So we talked about how we can be creative in this situation where smiling with each other. It can be difficult. We talked about ways to get creative. So be sure to get creative with your smile. The third point is to hold tight to the promise. The more you know the promise, the bolder you can be in your stand. When you know it beyond anything or anyone else, when nobody can talk you out of it, when you know it that solidly, then you will continue to stand in it, even when it doesn't seem logical. It's not going to this world, how we're standing on the word. It's never going to make sense to this world because it's not supposed to. The world is the enemy, the outsider. The world is the combative part. The word is the peace and the calm and the understanding, and the word is what we stand in. And so the more you know the promise and the promises, the more you'll stand bold in those promises. And that goes back to the first point of making God first. The more you know the word for yourself, the more you can stand in it. I can remember one time we were struggling financially. It was early in our marriage, and I was crying out to God, you promised that you would provide for us. You promised you would be our provision. And I had heard the teachings, and I had read the teachings from other people. And I remember stirring in my spirit the question of where did I make that promise? I did not know the promise myself. I knew what others said about the promise, but I didn't know the promise myself. So I began to invest in the promises of God and learning what those promises are. And the more I grew to know them, the more I just knew. Yes, it doesn't look like it right now. Yes, it looks like my son's trying to take the throne, but God promised. Yes, it looks like the Egyptians are fixing to take us, and there's water in between us and the Egyptians, and we got nowhere to run, but God promised. Those promises, the more you believe them, the more that they're in you, the more they become the very fabric of who you are, the stronger you'll stand in those promises. So when you're reading the scripture, or even just as a scripture study, Look for the promises of God. Do a search for the promises of God. See how they apply in your life. Remember, the word's the same today and tomorrow. It's never changing. So we can learn something from every word in the scripture if we're willing to invest and learn. And when we learn from the scripture, then we get to know the promises. And when we know the promises, we stand firm in those promises. And we have hope that comes up out of that knowing. Know the promises and know them for yourself. Thank you so much for joining me today on Growing Hope, where we are building that foundation that's going to give us the boldness to stand. Join me over at snarkyrainbows.com and get some more inspiration and encouragement for this journey of hope. You can also find me on social media, The Kathryn Lang on Facebook and The Kathryn Lang on The Kathryn C. Lang on Facebook and The Kathryn C. Lang on YouTube, Kathryn C. Lang on Twitter, and Kathryn C. Lang on Instagram. And someday I'll tell you the story of The Kathryn C. Lang and how that all came to be. I want to hear about how you're building this foundation of hope, because sharing stories of hope building encourage the journeys of others to build hope. Until next time, remember, be blessed and be a blessing.
Thank you for joining us for Growing Hope with Kathryn Lang, where we are sharing hope, encouragement, and inspiration to do more. Visit www.kathrynlang.com to invite Kathryn to be part of your event or to share your own stories of possibility living. Until next time, remember that a seed of hope planted and nurtured will grow up into a world of possibilities.